Welcome to Dark Truths. Religion Uncovered, a daring exploration into the deep, often hidden complexities of faith and belief systems that shape our lives today. Here we peel back the layers of modern spirituality to reveal the quiet bargains that lies beneath the surface. And we critically examine these contemporary practices against the stark and sometimes unsettling truths found within ancient theology. Tonight, we embark on a profound journey to confront a pivotal shift in the nature of worship. A transformation so normalized in today's society that it scarcely registers as corruption. This is the moment when worship transitioned from an act of true surrender into a transactional exchange. During ancient times, the act of worship was not merely an exchange. Rather, it was an act of profound exposure and vulnerability. People who approached the divine did so with the common understandings that nothing came with guarantees. Sacrifices made were not seen as a means to secure blessings. Instead, they served as deep acknowledgments of human dependence upon something greater than themselves. Consider for a moment the figure Abraham. He did not enter into a bargaining arrangement with God. Rather, he exhibited obedience without any foreknowledge of the outcomes to come. Similarly, Job's path of worship was not paved with expectations of reward. He worshipped even in the midst of losing everything he held dear. The prophets of old did not promise hope of prosperity. They were harbingers of upheaval, calling their communities to a deeper and more authentic understanding of the divine. However, in stark contrast, the modern belief system has inverted this ancient covenant. Today, worship is often framed as leverage, an instrument of control in the hands of the believer. The prevailing narrative suggested that if one prays correctly, blessings are sure to follow. If beliefs are aligned in the right way, the divine protection is assured. And if one gives faithfully, prosperity will return in kind. In this transactional faith landscape, God is reduced to a participant in a spiritual economy, while worship itself was transformed into mere currency used to facilitate a trade. This shift thrives on a false sense of empowerment. Transactional belief grants us the illusion of control, assuring believers that they can activate or maintain the divine favor through their actions. Yet the core tenets of ancient theology challenges this premise. God is not a being to be controlled. When worship becomes transactional, it loses all of its sacred essence, devolving into mere negotiation. Throughout Scripture, we find clear evidence that this transactional mindset is dismantled by a divine perspective. God repeatedly rejects sacrifices when they are offered devoid of justice and disregards prayers spoken selfishly for personal advantages. In the book of Isaiah, divine discontent is articulated with the words, "I am weary of your offerings." In Amos, God expresses disdain, stating, "I despise your festivals." These declarations are not blanket condemnations of worship itself. They are specific criticisms aimed at conditional worships, a form of spirituality that prioritizes outcomes over authenticity. Yet in today's contexts, the modern religion often portrays God as a dependable utility. Sermons are crafted to imply that faith guarantees an array of earthly benefits, such as success, protection, healing, and peace. When individuals do not receive these blessings, the tendency is to internalize the failure, not as a shortcoming of God, but as a personal inadequacy. This leads to a troubling outcome where faith morphs into performance anxiety, perpetuating an incessant cycle of self-doubt. The ancient believers, in contrast, understood that suffering was an inevitable aspect of existence. When faced with hardships, they did not perceive betrayal. They anticipated an authentic encounter with the divine. This sense of betrayal exposes the hidden transactional contract that underlies modern belief. If God does not meet our expectations, the fragile structure of faith is at risk of collapse. Ancient faith, however, thrived even in the face of disappointment, as it was never predicated on guaranteed outcomes, but was rooted in genuine encounters. In contemporary interpretations, God is often depicted as yearning for human participation, implying that he requires praise and validation. Worship in this scenario devolves into flattery, directed towards an insecure deity. In stark contrast, ancient theology introduces us to a God who is self-sufficient. The Psalms remind us, "If I were hungry, I would not tell you." Worship was never intended as a means to benefit God. Rather, it was devised for human alignment with the divine purpose. Yet modern beliefs frequently suggested that God's omnipotent power somehow hinges on human agreement, as if divine action awaits our permission. This notion would have horrified the theologians of old. The transactional model of worship diminishes God to the status of a mere service provider, leading individuals to shop for churches that cater to their personal needs. When expectations go unmet, they depart in search of alternatives, treating spiritual engagement like consumer loyalty. The ancient believer approached the divine knowing that obedience could cost them everything, while the modern individual tends to approach it with an expectation of returns. This is where the fracture occurs. A God who exists merely to serve our needs cannot be the transformative force capable of challenging our illusions. Consequently, transactional faith fosters fragile believers. When the anticipated exchange fails, faith evaporates. In contrast, ancient faith produced resilience because it anticipated loss. The God of Scripture never guaranteed comfort but consistently promised his unwavering presence. Presence is not a transaction. It involves vulnerability and can only be entered into authentically. And herein lies the essential truth. Worship is not how we compel God to act. It's how we learn to stand firm when he seems silent. So, as we conclude our examination, we pose this pivotal question, one that ancient faith would demand the modern religious landscape to confront. If worship no longer costs you anything, what precisely are you offering? Thank you for joining us. We invite you to share your reflections below. Has worship become a bargain? Or does it still retain its essence as surrender? Be sure to subscribe for more.